You're more than welcome to do that.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to start the meeting today. It's just after 10 a.m. We have a lot to cover today. We have my Christmas lunch out, so hopefully you can join us.
Three more.
There's more coming. Reminding you the meeting starts at 10. Okay, we're going to pause for 2 minutes while people come in.
They're on their way in. They did, however, get detoured by. Yes, it was like, yeah, it's the cookies. You gave me her cookies.
Oh,
It's an art form.
See the red up there.
I thought it was kids.
There's not.
Okay.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We'll start the meeting. We'll call the meeting to order. We do have quorum, Sally? All right. Any declarations of interest for today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on. Adoption of the minute. Resolved that the agenda for the December 8th, 2025 Board of Directors meeting be adopted as presented. Very little. Dana. All in favor? Carried. Approval of the minutes. Resolved that the minutes of the Board of Directors meeting held October 20th, 2025 be received and approved as printed. Any comments? Need someone to move that? And any? Someone second it, Wayne? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Receipt of the draft minutes, Finance and Administration Advisory Committee meeting for information. Any comments on that? No. Okay. And then we have the GM update by Sally.
Okay, I'll just focus in on a couple of items. So the first thing I want to do is give everybody an update on how we're progressing with the Mill and Town Museum and the establishment of the working group. We had a really good in-person session online on November 24th. It was well attended. There were, I think, roughly 30 people who had participated online. And I'm happy to report that by the end of it, nobody was saying they didn't have any questions on it. So I think we've done a good job in, full disclosure, data finances, the reasons behind the, the direction we're taking, etc. An important thing is that we did receive from North Lanark Historical Society an expression of interest. So you may have seen that attached to the GM report. So they're interested in having the working groups consider an option whereby they would manage the museum for us, but that they would co-locate their museum to our site. So it's an interesting concept to be considered by the working group and to meet on that bone and see what that would look like. The next thing I want to let you know is that we are finally today going to execute the agreement for the purchase and sale of the KMP trail. Right? Look at it. It's going to Lanark County after lunch today. We'll be meeting up with counterparts from counties of Frontenac, Lanark, and Renfrew to sign the agreement. So, hooray! We're finally there. That's great. And the other thing I want to mention is we had a presentation at the recent La Tournelle conference, and the project that Euro worked on with our summer student Violet French took second place, and this was a study of the impacts of climate change and in particular looking at the Carp River. So for it was an impressive piece of work, and it was lovely to have it. So that's all I wanted to highlight from that GM report.
Good.
May I get a copy of the Carp River? Probably you want to ask that.
Absolutely.
I'd be able to get a copy of the the poster of the tell maybe,
Yeah.
or something like that. That'd be great. Thank
Any other questions or comments for Sally? Being done, we'll move on to item number 4, Bill 68. Conservation Authority amalgamation. I'll read the motion before Sally presents. Resolve the Board of Directors direct staff to submit the comments contained in attachment 2 regarding the proposed amalgamation of conservation authorities for URL postings at 25-1257. Sally?
Hello. So, presentation I gave to finance and admin 2 weeks ago. Those of you who sat through that meeting, you're going to see a lot of the same slides today. My apologies for that. But even since I prepared this deck and this report, on Friday I participated in a consultation hosted by the province in the city here for all the I don't know, I can't really actually say all the municipalities. I don't know who got invited and who didn't get invited to the event last Friday. So as I go through the deck, I'll sort of add additional commentary from what I learned on Friday. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So just to recap, when CAs were created, they were only ever formed because the municipalities wanted them to form, and municipalities under the current writing of the legislation also have the ability to remove themselves from CA. So it's a municipally driven organization. And while the act was adopted in 46, municipalities across Ontario, climbed onto this model at various times. We didn't sign on until 68, for example. Coast Nation in the east was one of the first in the province to sign on. But it's always been a municipally driven organization. That said, initially it was primarily funded by the province. We've seen over time, of course, is that municipalities have had to take on more and more of the funding as the province has removed it. So right now, just to remind you guys, 68% of our operating budget is funded through your municipal levies. If you want to go to the next slide. So what the province is proposing is to consolidate from 36 down to 7. And they've also now passed Bill 68, which allows for the creation of a crown agency to oversee these proposed 7 regions. And so what we are being asked to consult on or to comment on are the 7 regions. The agency is a done deal. That's already passed in law. So they're going to, in all likelihood, create this agency. And I anticipate that that will happen in earnest once they get into the provincial fiscal 26. So April 1st is when they'll probably start to. On Friday, the assumed director of that new agency, Hassan Bassett, indicated that they are getting funding for 10 to 12 staff. So if you want to go to the next slide. So this is the region, and it covers from Cataraqui region in the west, all the way to Raisin region in the east, and then the 3 CAs that are in the city of Ottawa, us in the west, then Rideau, and then South Nation. It's over 18,000 square kilometers. It's a huge, huge area. What's a note though is we're the only ones in this region that actually have significant water control structures that we own and manage. None of the others do. They might have structure in their jurisdiction, but they're not owners or operators of it. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. So about the agency, I think the most concerning thing is the apparent potential for duplication of responsibilities between that of the regional CA boards and the agency. So you'll see in the 3rd bullet there, the power to issue directions to CAs on matters such as strategic planning, budgeting, asset management, procurement, IT, service standards, performance targets, and indicators. So, I mean, I think those things as being your purview. And so the question is, how much does that agency actually direct what these new regional CAs are to do? I'd say that Hassan took pains on Friday to say that there's all sorts of checks and balances within the agency, that the minister has to sign off or not, at least be circulated on these things, and don't worry. I'm a warrior. I read that and I look at that and I see there's a strong potential for, I would call it overreach. So we'll all find out in the end, assuming this comes to fruition. As another big red flag for me was it will require the payment of fees in respect of any matter related to the performance of its duties. So the agency can levy fees, and literally the last one says and collect levies from authorities. So and apportion those amounts to the authorities. So it was interesting because he seemed quite defensive on this on Friday. And I don't know that they've really thought through the implications of a municipal government funding a provincial agency. So we'll see where that goes. He seemed to indicate, and sorry, I'm going to divert and say through another provincial event that I didn't attend, so it's hearsay. Whoever that provincial person was that was speaking indicated that while initially the agency wouldn't charge, at some point it would start to charge the CAs for the services. So, so again, there's uncertainty. Can you go to the next slide, please? So what we don't know is more than what we do know, and they mainly revolve around the whole governance structure and the funding. So he indicated on Friday, please do put forward details of what you want to see, both in terms of governance for your region. So that's what I had done in the draft response that you have in the package there. But he also made it clear that while he was interested in some adjustments, he was not interested in what actually I put forward in my report to you. So we'll need to have a bit of a conversation around that. Specifically, he wasn't interested in taking an existing boundary like South Nation and divvying it, because South Nation has both St. Lawrence and Ottawa. He wasn't interested in that. So the whole concept of a lower Ottawa, I don't know that he's going to be on for. So it's something to think about. And I just learned that Friday. So and he seemed pretty firm on that. He felt it would be too disruptive. I could argue that there's other stuff that are going to be really more disruptive. But that was his comment. It was too disruptive.
Well, that's a good point. We didn't realize when we said that one conservation was already that way.
Yes. So I knew that, just for the record, okay?
Yes.
So I've already mentioned about the municipal levies. You know, it would be subject to now these charges from the agency. I personally made the comment to him because at our table we were tasked with asking the question, addressing the question, you know, that in state, what would be the first big thing we'd want to focus on is, you know, an improvement that this region could tackle. And around the table, we more or less agreed, like, we're not answering that question. We're more interested in how we address this. And the big how question is who's funding it, which is the amalgamation cost. Like, how is this all going to happen? And for all these things. And so I made the point that what we're really looking at is a redistribution of property taxes, you know, because we're 68% municipally funded. It comes from largely property taxes as opposed to an infusion of new provincial dollars. So you can draw the boundaries however you want, unless you're putting new dollars into the system, you're just redistributing property taxes one jurisdiction to another. So I said pointedly, you know, you've talked about your agency that you're going to be resourced to tell us what to do and how to do it. We want to know who's paying for us to do it. And so this remains, I think, for a lot of people in that room on Friday, the sticking point in all of this is who's gonna pay for all of this amalgamation and all these projects and technical improvements to occur? He was explicit on the second last bullet there, CA reserves, that there will be no rating reserves. The reserves will stay with the CA, the jurisdiction that they were developed in. That said, ultimately, later in the meeting, he made the comment, well, whatever the board is that comes in, they'll ultimately be making decisions. So, okay, next slide, please. Not to beat a dead horse, but I think many of us have been through amalgamation. We know it takes a lot of money, a lot of effort. It's highly disruptive. And it's embedded with a certain amount of risk. I've actually did some research because I wanted to know what's the history. You know, do we have metrics to demonstrate how successful amalgamations are? The Fraser Institute, I think most people in this room would know, is a conservative organization. Came out expressly and said, no, they don't deliver results. You know, they overpromise and under-deliver, and they often raise costs universally because of, you know, pay normalization. And when you have equalization of service, well, invariably, you're raising the service levels, and that costs more money. So there seemed to be no acknowledgement of that on Friday, unfortunately. And of course, until the governance model is known, there's concern about the ability of your municipalities to control the spending on the services that you're paying. Okay, next slide, please. So these are the criteria that the province had put forward. I'm fine with them. The last one is where he was hanging his hat by not wanting to split SCA like South Nation, Ottawa, into the St. Lawrence. That's where that service can go. On the next slide, go to the next slide, are the criteria that I'm suggesting. If you were doing this from scratch, you know, we need to be considering a whole lot of other things like financial fairness, you know, where are your property taxes going? And operational effectiveness. Personally, I think an area of 18,000 square kilometers is a very difficult area for people to service effectively. You know, I think of all of you just coming here today, you know, it takes effort to get everybody in the room to meet. Similarly, our staff go out to sites, right? So from an operational effectiveness, a governance effectiveness, I think 18,000 square kilometers is too big. Also, it ignores the fact that we have partner agreements. We have MOUs already in place with both Rideau and South Nation and even TRCA, Toronto Region, to mitigate our costs because we do share professional staff amongst us. So the incremental amount that amalgamation is going to get us is negligible because we already do share professional expertise amongst the CAs. Now, that might not be the case universally, but that's where the whole concept of looking at each region separately and considering what are the needs of those areas, what are the primary gaps, and what's the best way to address them, rather than a one-size-fits-all, we're going to amalgamate you all down to stuff. And then lastly, the reason why I put before you an option for an Ottawa River Basin versus the St. Lawrence Basin is also because of the regulatory difference. They are regulated differently. And we are to this day working hard to try to build relationships on the other side of the Ottawa River. It just would dilute those efforts if then we were trying to manage on the other side of St. Lawrence and interfacing with the IJC, the International Joint Commission. So, you know, you're diluting those kind of efforts if you're trying to make the region too big. You go to the next slide, please. So I won't go into too much detail, but in the report, I do set out, you know, there are alternatives that we can pursue. So in terms of improving consistency, the big one that makes its way into the ERO comments is they should update their guidelines. One of the reasons why there is a difference in implementation at Boston amongst the CAs is because we're all dealing with outdated guidelines. So if they just simply update their guidelines and give clear directions to all the CAs, it would make consistency a whole lot easier. Next slide. So in terms of processing times, Um. The province, so in terms of planning reviews, we actually do it for the province. I have to admit, this first bullet is a bit tongue in cheek in that I don't think they want to do their own planning reviews. They don't, want to be associated with planning reviews, I don't think. And two, they know that they're not resourced and there's no way they could turn around the plan reviews in the same amount of time as we do. I mean, our plan reviews, we make our targets well over, 90% of the time. So our key KPIs on planning and permit reviews, CA's tackled this post 2019, because we are getting a lot of flack for this. And so CA's made a lot of effort in this, and we have upped our game and we're doing way better than we used to. And we, particularly MVCA, are doing extremely well. In terms of the permitting system, they want to have a province-wide system. I would just offer a cautionary note. I would work temporarily for a period of time with the feds, and I got caught up in that whole Phoenix HR system fiasco. And in part, that happened because they rolled it out across the federal civil service all at once. They didn't pilot in places. They didn't, do proper testing of it. And my fear is, if they do a similar thing at the provincial level, it could disrupt permitting on a province-wide basis. So any concerns they have about meeting timelines today could be truly disrupted by that. The other thing is, of course, the devil's in the details, in that if they're starting to screen things out, that really, a massive tool is not going to be able to consider the nuances of individual sites. So if it's used to screen out sites that really actually need a sober second thought, that's going to be a problem down the road when issues occur. Next slide, please. Yes, Mary.
At this point, this idea of a provincial set of guidelines in provincial format. Your two reasons. What exactly were they trying to do with this? What is the underlying motive of the province?
So I think it's twofold. One, they want a one-stop shop, so that if a developer is operating TRCA here, South Nation, wherever they are, they can go online, input their requirements. The clock starts. The clock starts when they press send, and that these things can be tracked. So it's a bit of user friendly, one window approach, and tracking timelines. My fear is also it will be used as a screening tool, and we'll lose the ability to really have a conversation with people, because we rely heavily on pre-consultations to engage with people in a conversation about what do you want, what's your objectives, and then walking the site with them and assessing what's reasonable, what's probably not in the cards, and that sort of thing. And through that process, you also explain to people why what your neighbor's doing isn't possible on your property. Because people look at the setbacks and they say, well, it's the same setback. Yeah, but look at the slope. The water's going to come higher on your property. And yes, your neighbors, but the same setback doesn't apply, right? So it's things like that. It's a level of service and a matter of being able to engage with the public. So I'm not poo-pooing the whole idea. I'm just saying, if they're going to do it, it should be phased. Like, don't pull a Phoenix. People are being sued today to get, by the government to get their monies back. Yes.
Just a question to what you just said. By one-stop shop and implementing all your information, doesn't the clock start ticking when it's complete? So there's a possibility of not having complete and not having that one-on-one with, so that you are submitting it complete.
Agreed. Yes. So there's the submission date, and then we have to review it to see if it's actually complete.
Right.
Because what we find is it might be complete in that they've submitted a report, but it could be a 2-pager with very little substance and on which to really assess an application, right? So then you invariably have to go back and ask for more information, or it's unclear. you know, maybe it's poorly written, it happens. You know, so you have to ask for clarification, right? So once you know that you've got a complete package, that's when we press start, right? So those are kind of like the nuances of how are they gonna use this, right? And then I would also worry, as they've done, I think at the municipal level, will they punish us? Right? You don't meet your housing targets, you're not getting certain grants, right? So how is this tool going to be used? It could have it be used for punitive purposes. I'm not trying to, you know, I'm just saying, on all of this, the unknowns are greater than the knowns. So I'm not trying to be super negative in this. I'm just saying these are things that you need to think about.
Sure.
Yeah, I think you have to think about this government and how they work. Think, and like, so as far as doing this, it's not too much different, say, small scale, but police service board, the going to school boards, the health unit, all the same stuff. But the other thing to think about, and Sally's saying about, you know, the rules and stuff. I've been around a while now, and like for years, the official plan and how we did not change. Like nothing changed. These guys have no fear in putting out new provincial policy statements on planning for month, changing things. So just saying that when they do this, if there's something with the policy or the plan, what we're doing now, they'll change the whole thing. Like they have no fear in changing how site plans are done or official plans are done or what setbacks are. It's just a habit, right? Like that you're right. So there's arguing that, you know, what we're doing today, how's it gonna work in the new one, those are changing. If it's not working, well, they think it should, that's all. I'm just saying 20 or 50 years before that, nothing changed hardly at all. I can remember Jim Watson, the old the planning guy. Now just do it months. But anyway, that's the difference in government thought, I think.
Any other questions for Sally before she continues? All right, so,
Next slide. So they did speak, you know, in terms of increasing investment. But any discussion I've heard about resourcing is the agency. So I'm not hearing any new dollars. That doesn't mean they're not coming. It would be lovely if they could increase the funding. I'm not sure that's gonna happen. And you've heard me express more than once my concerns and upset about the WECI program and how it's administered and the value of the envelope, the funding envelope. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. So this is this equalization baseline operating capacity. This is where they have within their power today the ability to adjust what's called Section 39 funding. Every CA in the province gets this grant annually. It's the grant that they cut in half back in 2019 when they initiated the first round of all the changes. They could do a redistribution of funds. In my humble opinion, I don't think TRCA needs money from the province. They could, you know, they could probably take the grant that the TRCA gets and redistribute it amongst those who are have-nots, right? And I raised this on Friday that, you know, just like amongst the municipalities, some of you have large assessment values, some of you don't. And your ability to deliver services is directly tied to that, and otherwise you depend upon grants. And they could help normalize and equalize services by just addressing these inequities at the provincial grant level. You can go to the next slide, please. And so again, similarly, in terms of reducing overhead costs, yes, admittedly, you have 36 CAs, there's absolutely going to be overhead amongst all of them. So, but as we've discussed previously, amongst the CAs, just as we've done with the sharing of professional services at the sort of operational frontline staff unit level, we could also do that at the administrative level in terms of IT support. Like I believe many of you get support IT from County Lanark. right? So, there's other alternatives without causing the mayhem of amalgamation. You want to go to the next slide, please? So, they don't seem inclined to be listening to alternatives. That doesn't mean you don't tell them, could you please consider alternatives? So now what I'm going to do is quickly go through what the draft submission says, in case you haven't had the chance to read it, because this motion is basically asking you to sign off on these. Oh, can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. That other slide I meant to do this part. Okay, so it starts off by saying, sure, there's issues to be dealt with, and we support the objectives of the products. There's nothing wrong with the objectives they're shooting for, so it's nice to be able to start and say, sure, we agree with your objectives. But we do disagree with the proposed means for achieving those objectives, and the reasons being, we don't think broad scale amalgamation is needed. As an organization, I think we're well run and can address outstanding issues through harnessing our existing partnerships. That the proposed approach, amalgamation, it is highly disruptive. It could actually be counterproductive to the build faster goal of the province. I mean, all the CAs in the province would be dealing with all this amalgamation stuff. And as stated previously, they often result in increased costs while failing to deliver on promises. So, are there any concerns with those messages from the ERA? Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. So the next one is around the St. Lawrence region. So we disagree with that because it covers the 2 water basins. And because the migration of property taxes outside of the area that you all have direct impacts from and influence on, that it's too large an area for effective day-to-day operations and practical challenges in terms of customer service and board cohesion and like. Are there any concerns about this point in the ERO?
Sure. Just when they said absolutely no, you think we should still say this? Which I have, but like I can see now one is wasn't.
So we're talking, first of all, it's a very small area. It's basically south of the 401. That's number one. So, and the thing to realize is those municipalities, when they asked South Nation to take on, so I think about Mississippi Mills, the north half of Mississippi Mills, the north half of North Frontenac, you're in MNR territory, right? And I was talking to Tara works with Roy at North Frontenac. And she says, it's like we send things to the province and we don't hear back, right? So that's what the South Nation municipalities along the St. Lawrence are experiencing, where, MNR is the default. So they asked SN if they could, right?
So is South Nation in agreement with Twenty Affairs?
So South Nation is actually taking a very hard line. They object to everything and they just want to stay as is. And they've done that and for several reasons. One being it's a francophone community and they're bilingual CA and they're afraid that they will lose their ability to deliver services in French if they amalgamate. Alternatively, if you make the whole region bilingual, the costs for everybody are going to go up. Right? So I don't know that if that's the one they're hanging their hat on, but the last intel I had from South Nation is they're like, no go. I would say that Raisin region has a similar thing going, but to the north. So the municipality that they service north of Cornwall partially said, well, just do all of our municipality, right? So that area would go north into the Ottawa River, the lower Ottawa concept. She was amenable 100% to the dignity of it. She said, well, I'd give it up in the north, but I'd be gaining along the St. Lawrence, connecting her to Cut Region. So she felt if this was the model that went forward, she understood 100%, stick to the water basin line, there'll be gives and takes. I would actually be curious to hear from Clark and Glenn on this, because I know that the city was discussing what it might put on the table. I don't know if you guys are in a position to comment on that at this time, or if not.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, so City of Ottawa staff are writing a response, a formal response, but we have counselors who are board members on each of the three CAs that Ottawa is a part of, and we are working on a motion that we're going to bring to council on Wednesday. And just in broad strokes, the motion opposes the amalgamation and raises issues that are aligned to Sally's presentation here around protecting the municipal taxpayer, around protecting the reserves that are in place for within the CAs and the projects, concerns about governance, and then similar concerns about boundaries. And our motion speaks to this lower Ottawa River Basin. If you have to amalgamate, it doesn't make sense to combine the Ottawa and the St. Lawrence. Clark has been working with me on this, Kathy Curry, Alan Hubley, and then we have I think 6 or 7 other counselors that are members of the other two CAs.
So, Richard, in answer to your question, I don't know. You know, I think it's worth a shot, sort of thing.
Well, I was just agreeing, it's worth your shot, what are they going to do? You've been in what would be considered an informal information session where you brought it up and got shot down. Well, fine, but don't quit. Keep going.
You want to go to the next slide? With that in mind, we're requesting a pause so that we can actually explore what makes sense in Eastern Ontario. Like we've been given very little time. Now on this, he said on Friday that he's using December 22nd is the deadline. They're going to use January, February to make their mind up in terms of what they want. And then they're going to in the spring, so I don't know if that means March or April or later, but they're going to table the next round of amendments to the CAI that will put these new amalgamated regions into place and presumably the new governance structure for them. He indicated that there would be another round of consultation on that bill when it comes down, but I mean, we all know what that typically looks like. It's like 30 days and then it's passed the day after the deadline comment. So this is really, I think, our only opportunity if he stays that course. So, but at least we can ask for the pause. Okay, next, start please. And the additional criteria that I set out in the report earlier. You want to go to the next slide? And then I put on the table this alternative and the reasons for it, which we've discussed. So I don't know if there's anything anybody wants to add to that. But for point C there, when I used to be a city staffer, I mean, and this is going back in time, we had quarterly meetings with the CAs. The city met with the 3 CAs. I remember meeting with Paul Lehman and the other GMs at the other CAs. Like, there is a long-standing working relationship between the CAs and the city. And that's why, in part, the relationship's been working so well for so many years. We already do collaborate on rate setting and policies and that sort of thing. So, like any relationship, it has its ups and downs, it has its points it's working on, but it wouldn't be a relationship if it didn't. You want to go to the next slide, please? So this one, doesn't follow to the letter the current legislation, because the current legislation is impractical. 46 municipalities would have a minimum of 46. And if you actually did the math to figure out how many board members there were, it'd be over 70. So we know a board of 70 members under the current, legislation is, well, 46 is fully impractical.
I can't make enough cookies.
Well, the humor's always
You don't
good.
want to share.
Sure.
So, so.
Can you put that in the air?
So this is just a first attempt, and the thing you'll notice is Helen. And same with my Greater Madawaska, because the percentage is so low. There, and it was pointed out to me that in a lot of CAs, well, for instance, North Frontenac doesn't fit on Quinties because the amount of land in there. So I don't know, I haven't looked at, but I'm imagining a lot of you is in Quinty.
Yeah, most of it is in the Quincy.
Yeah,
We do have some of the other section that isn't covered by
Yes.
anybody.
well, MNR in theory. Yeah.
Default.
So I had to put something on the table for you guys to look at. It does not reflect the current, based on assessment value. And it's not 100% accurate either, because when I was looking at the numbers for Leeds and Grenville, they included all that St. Lawrence River part that wouldn't drain into the lower Ottawa. So this is an estimate. So I'm not sure if you feel, I think it's going to be debated and discussed probably starting in January, February, and there'll be a chance to revisit this, but I felt it was important to put something on the table that represented, in part where the money's coming from, but it's not. Yes,
It makes a suggestion to maybe put some wording there to reflect that.
Yeah.
As opposed to looking at it thinking that was a sense. But if you put the wording that this is an estimate or
yeah,
just so that they know we're not feeling the factual.
yes, yeah.
Anna?
Don't know if it's possible, and I know you're on a timeline deadline here, but I'm wondering whether for the 3 watersheds, there is some way to cover representation across all the watersheds. So for example, is the upper Mississippi covered? Is the, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I don't, so that are parts of these watersheds that might be similar, they're going to be missing some kind of representation. I don't know enough about the Rideau and the South Nation to know whether this covers everything for them, but there is an upper watershed of Mississippi River. I'm not sure that that's in them.
Yeah. So, the way I was visualizing it is, for those of you familiar with the city of Ottawa, they're the former townships, in West Carleton, Rideau, Osgood, and Cumberland. The Cumberland? I think it's Cumberland, right? So that's 4. Then you have the 3 sort of, outer urban areas, and then you have the core. That's how I got 8, notionally. That's how I came up with the 8. In terms of upper Mississippi, there would be 3 from Lanark and 1 from Frontenac. But you're right, 3 from Lanark, that would have to cover both the Rideau's
Right.
area as well as ours.
I just don't know if it's possible to, I know you're looking at assessment value, but I just want to make sure that if there, at a county level or whatever, that parts of watersheds are not left out. And I don't know if that's possible, but it's just something, it becomes a geographical puzzle. Combined with the assessment puzzle.
Yeah.
Problem is that the appointment of these people will be from Leonard County. So they're gonna appoint you to one. You can't say, taking a chunk of Mr. Mills and Drummond. No, but who's gonna appoint them? The people that are paying, they appoint them. But I'm sure the assessment will go to the county too, for some system. and would be accounting for 3 people.
But they could be giving guidelines where they have, right, so that you get them cheaper. I don't know if it's possible. It's just a thought.
I gotta go narrative.
I appreciate the fact that this is sort of roughly based on population / resources. But in terms of us, in terms of that, if the representation were for Mississippi were simply from land, what up here that's important in terms of dams and control?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Because even though there's little population up in there, the key to controlling the Mississippi River system, as far as I've learned over 3 years, is up there in very, very rural districts. And I can't afford intelligently to ignore where your water's coming from.
Could have said that exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
Bev?
So what happens if a municipality decides to withdraw? You were saying they can withdraw at any time. Like if I was in one of these areas that was not going to have representation, which is a very important. If I was an actor, I'd be saying, where are the guys in there anymore?
That might be you checking hands.
So, I'll answer 2 things. So I'm gonna start with the headwater question, I'll call it. I think we could increase Lanark and Frontenac on the grounds that they're headwaters, and or have one for Addington Highlands on the basis that it's a headwater. So do you want us to if headwaters extra because of the critical play in it increases the board size, but right now we're sitting at roughly the same size as we are today, right? It's 3, 6, 9, 8, 17. So that's the size of the board today. So some boards, I think Rito has over 22. Some boards are quite large. We could add 1 or 2 extra and still be a manageable size board.
So we had an egg right.
Yeah.
Right, so I think they had water was.
It makes sense, because if our whole objection to this proposal is that it's not watershed focused, then the representation on the board should be watershed focused. So, because if the board is there to manage the watershed, then it should be watershed focused. If it's there to manage the municipalities, then it should be.
So I'm gonna throw out an idea then. If we had 2 seats for headwaters and it rotated. And that, so for us, it's Addington Highlands, Frontenac and Lanark are our headwaters by and large. To a much lesser extent, Greater Madawaska. Just as a starting point for the discussion, because we just need to put something in front of them, and it's the issue that we want to get across as headwaters.
Yeah.
That they understand and respect that, then would that be an okay proposition to put down for this?
That's a good way. Working.
Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna, so 2 rotating seats amongst the headwater municipalities
On top of that.
on top of this.
Yeah.
So like the agriculture idea where it's municipal appointments here, plus these people who are appointed somehow.
Exactly.
Some of them.
Helen, do you have a comment or question?
No, I think that's good. I'm very happy with what people are saying. Like I said, but we do control a lot of water. I hate to tell you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Okay, so 2 additional seats rotating amongst headwater municipalities, something like that?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Any other comments on item 7 before Sally continues?
Oh,
Clark, go ahead.
How do we picture those 2 positions being selected? Like right now, it's clear each municipality at the beginning of the term, or if it changes through midterm governance, selects their representatives to be on these types of boards. So How would the rotating positions be selected? Would the municipality select them? Would some municipalities get seats in the rotation during some terms and not others? Or just wondering if you could comment on your vision for that.
Candidly, my vision is 5 minutes old, so. So, but like you just suggested, Clark, I think, per term of council. Or every 2 years.
The alternate does this. Super alternate. Every 2 years they rotate it.
Oh, okay, 2 years, there you go, so that's a precedent, okay. Does that work, Clark?
That's something to work with, yeah.
I guess my concern with rotating is you want to make sure you have a balance of board members that are already, you don't want a whole new board every 2 years because a lot of
Just those two positions.
just on those two positions.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, great, thank you for that feedback, that was very, very helpful. Okay, next slide, please. So key, this is all about the how. So phased implementation. Because my worry, particularly, for instance, on that tool, is that if they have us all sign on to this new provincial permitting tool and there's problems with it, that could be really horrible for everybody.
Maybe we're gonna get to spot on that. You might get a spine on it, so here.
Yeah.
But so having worked with the feds, they have at times done things in a phased approach where one department will do it. Yeah, and then they'll roll it out to a second proof of concept and then they'll roll it out broadly. That would be my hope, is that they could, try it in a couple of them, well-staffed CAs that can, pivot. Anyway, so I just highly recommend phased implementation. That they please do take the time to consider our shared service delivery model or a shared corporation model. So the shared corporate model is where you establish a service corporation and we all pay into that service corporation, and that service corporation takes care of all of those administrative services for us. They work for us. So it's just two alternatives that would be way less disruptive and have the ability to achieve the same outcome. Establish a transition board for each region. And the main thing there is that we need to have representation ourselves. If it's all handled out of Toronto, it would be a very scary situation, I think, for all of us. They just won't have the day-to-day interaction and familiarity with our work to do it smoothly. So, and the phased implementation overlaps with E, but the phased implementation generally is try one CA, see how it goes. If they just pull the plug on all 7 regions on day 1, I just, yeah, good luck, it's right. I just see planning and approvals in Ontario being really problematic. So I really hope they phase anything that comes forward.
Yeah, maybe you could actually recommend, maybe you could actually recommend that particular area be the Toronto area, because that's actually the area they live in.
Yeah.
So you might want to add that in.
Okay. Yep.
And say we recommend this area, and you can turn it up, if you will, as to why it's so good for Toronto's to do it in Toronto, and that'll make them feel good.
No.
We know that that's the area they really care about, right?
If I could comment on that, yes, that's where the problems lie from
Yes.
the planning approvals and speed and all that sort of thing. But Hassan is, I think, personally concerned about all the smaller CAs in the regions, the outer periphery, that aren't able to deliver what he considered baseline quality levels of service. So, because I put the question to him on Friday, I said, Hassan, I'm assuming, and this was, again, maybe a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's truthful. I said, Hassan, you were GM of Halton region for 10 years. I'm assuming it's best in class.
And it's not.
Well, it is probably in many ways. However, I said, why would you undermine that by forcing that CA to amalgamate? right? You're gonna dilute it and pull resources away from it. Unnecessarily. He didn't, not surprisingly, but there are CAs that are doing extremely well from all these business processes and technology and all this sort of stuff. He wants to see that into the regions, and that's a fair objective. It's the methods that we have concerns about. So you can suggest the GTA, but from some of the things he's interested in, I don't know whether
Well, then
that's.
change it, then change it to another adjacent type, like the Namasawagas and those guys.
Yeah.
You know, what I'm saying? So maybe consider actually suggesting a particular area that would appeal to him.
Not a Wasaga would.
Yes, I know. Had a discussion, because there's definitely amount of opportunities in that area. And then, you know, it addresses his interest and gives them food for thought. You know, well, maybe we can roll this thing for time, and then they can screw things up, and then they can just.
Okay, are people comfortable with me suggesting where they might start and?
As long as it's not us. We're about us.
No, and if you read the text, it is like on a needs basis, like start where their issues are the greatest.
Right.
Focus on filling those out. Okay, next slide, please. So then these are the remaining ones. So we object to municipalities carrying any of these tasks associated with amalgamation. We're objecting to any direct or indirect transfer of municipal funds to the provincial government, this agency, that we requested the approaches that I presented to you, that they update those provincial guidelines, you know, because that would be the first step in providing consistency and permitting approach across the province. And that lastly, they keep this office because this is the works yard and this services these communities, and we need access to those dams, and it would be foolish to close this office. Now, on that point, he was explicit on Friday again in saying no office closures. So we'll take that at face value.
With the Helgans.
So, okay, I think that's the end of my presentation. Yes, it is. So if you wanted to stop sharing.
Any questions, comments first on this?
Just a question, I was wondering if you would want to throw a issue of language of service delivery into the report just to support some nation's objection. Because it is a bit of a hornet's nest, you know, that well, Laura, the question for them to answer is, would we be expected to become a land lending organization? In terms of if this given this regional amalgamation, the answer would be of course yes. But what does that mean in terms of staff retention in Kingston or here?
Yes.
If all of a sudden there's that bilingual requirement.
Yeah.
Because that just might be a good reason for the province to pause things in Eastern Ontario.
Yeah,
But they don't have.
Sal and I talked about that actually last week about bilingual
Just
board
with
meetings.
the politics around it, they'll. They might lift their hands off them.
Glenn, you have a comment or a question?
Hi, thanks, Chair. Generally in support of what Sally has presented, and I mentioned what we're working on as a municipality, but I just want to say a thank you to our GM and to our chair for all of your work over the past few weeks and really going back months. You've had to deal with unexpected announcements and curveballs, whether it's about funding or governance or amalgamation, whatever it is. And thank you for keeping us up to date and for rolling with the punches and all the work that you're doing to respond to this. Just wanted to say thank you to both of you.
Thank you. Actually, if I could ask of both Glenn and Clark, if you have any comments on the bilingual issue, because I think City of Ottawa, you guys are officially bilingual, are you not?
Yes, all of our meetings are everything is offered in both official languages. I think it's for me, it's not, it doesn't come up in my neck of the woods. Like it wouldn't be an issue for me, but I can, and it was the first time I thought about that was this morning when you were talking about it, actually, in terms of the east end of Ottawa or the southeast and the prevalence of the use of the French language there. And so, yeah, I imagine that would be an issue that we would need to navigate. Absolutely.
Any other comments or questions? Richard?
Just, I was wondering, everything else just seemed to go to, when they go to divide up the bill on a per capita basis. I just, is there any way, Sally, to gain information of what our assessment is per capita compared to the other municipalities? The other, city conservation authorities?
Yeah.
Per capita, because that was one of the things for the health units, the same thing with the police, they leveled it. This is gonna be the number across the board, and if you were low or high. It didn't matter, this is what you're good, because everybody had to be equal. And I guarantee you, we're not equal right now, and I guarantee you our funding isn't equal, so already pointed out.
Yeah.
And that as far as, if you want to influence how municipalities think like this, that would be one of those tools to do that.
So we have numbers from the province. We have it for ourselves, Rideau and South Nation. We can get it from Raisin and, no, not from Raisin. In fact, no, we haven't yet.
No.
We could. We'll try to get them. The issue is the denominator, the population numbers that were given by the province. They've always been wonky. We don't know where these numbers come from. So we'll use the numbers that province gives us because it's on the same spreadsheet that gives us.
Those numbers account. So-
Yeah, so I just wanted to let you guys know, we'll do the math, we'll figure it out and we'll give you those numbers. I'll send you an email once we've got the information in, but I don't trust the denominator. The population numbers have always struck us as weird. So.
That's what they use.
Yeah. Fair, yes. Okay, so with that, I'll make the changes that we discussed today.
And maybe with that, what we pay on our levy per population, but also with the grant we get from the province comparing each one.
Yeah.
On a per capita basis.
Any other comments, questions? So I'm gonna read the motion again, because I guess it's a little changed. So resolved that the board of directors direct staff to submit the comments contained in attachment two regarding the proposed amalgamation of conservation authorities per ERO posting 025-1257 as amended. So I need to have someone to move that, please.
Should we have something about it, like, let's say this is gonna happen.
What's gonna happen? They're gonna agree to us?
No.
Oh.
But. So we're the only one with capital asset, the dams. Should we not be asking that cost get spread over the whole new CEO? The whole new organization? Like, we're trying, let's say it's happening, trying to find a positive. Instead of us having to pay for those dams, we should want everybody.
All set.
Yeah.
All 5 jurisdictions that would make up our.
Yeah.
Oh, that, sorry.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if we're looking for a win would be that the assessment for those dams is spread over the whole new organization, not just our portion.
But it could be our dam.
So what? Nobody's gonna want any of this stuff.
There is a risk that could be applied for a whole lot of
Other things, that's what I.
We would have to be.
Like, so the
Like
question,
what? You said it was done.
well, I'm just saying, I'm not sure that there are water control structures, but there may be other capital projects that in other groups that you end up having to pay for. She's already indicated that there's a concern about taking money out of municipal areas, right, and being used in other municipal areas, right? That's one of your concerns. So now we're going against that by making that recommendation.
Well, that's our biggest anchor around our necks here. And if there was any wind, we could spread that.
I'm gonna go to Jeff first, so. Oh, I thought you had your hand, sorry. So, go ahead.
So, if you look at our neighbor Rideau Valley, now they have a way bigger urban area. And they serve a much larger population, and I think their budget is roughly double ours. But they don't own any dams. So, and as you, and we're be looking at our budget, a huge percentage of the levy is going towards the capital renewal on that. You know, it's not, I mean, most of the money is definitely still going to operating, but you guys have been making increasing contributions on the capital side. I suspect that if this area gets amalgamated, they're gonna ask the question, why is it an operating cost so high? You know, just based upon how come they're double us and they don't have the capital assets we do. I think that's a question I'd look at.
State hands up, sir.
So the Rideau Conservation Authority, their levy is roughly double ours, or their operating budget, let me be clear, their operating budget is roughly double ours. So, but they don't have one system that we do. So the ratio of their capital to operating is different from ours. But the levy they charge is roughly double ours because they're operating one. So I think there will be questions asked across the board on why are some people's operating costs higher than others, despite the fact that they are servicing a larger, more dense population. But Janet, I think one of the things is a lot of the cost that the Rideau has are category 2 and 3, right? Okay. So, and they do cost recovery on those. So, and I have candidly, I've never looked at their budget in detail, and I don't have access to all the back paperwork for their budget, so I can't really speak knowledgeably to it, other than I know that whereas we've gotten down the category 2 and 3 to 4% in this 5% in this budget we'll be tabling next. The Rideau's is 19%, and it's 19% of double the number. So I think there's going to be lots of questions if this happens.
Okay, so the motion is still on the floor. I need a mover and a second. Dana, moved by Dana. Seconded by Mary Lou. All in favor? Pass. All right.
Good work. Thank you, and thank you everybody for your patience on that. That was a big item, but it's a big item. So one of those.
There's a lot of big items on this agenda today. It's 10 after 11. We have a luncheon at 12. This agenda was much longer. We've taken things out of it when we had the review. So I just want to everyone wary of the time. It's 10 after 11. Okay, so item number 5, draft budget, where the motion made the presentation.
Next slide. Okay, so budget is based on the October meeting, where you guys signed off on the parameters that would direct, you know, how much we're assuming in terms of increase in assessment growth, how much we're going to increase the capital levy by based upon the table that you guys approved a couple of years ago, and the cost of living increase to the pay. And then making that final transfer of wages onto the municipal levy that we had been paying out of the operating reserve. Go to the next slide, please. So here's how the percentage changes shape up. One of the important things I want to point out is you'll see category 2 has gone down by almost 30%. What we did this year is every year we've been refining our timesheet system to really be able to properly categorize how people are spending their time. And so this reflects actuals from 2025. So we realized that people actually weren't spending as much time as on category 2, and we're able to spend more time on category 1 as a result. And so these are largely based upon actuals. The category 3 has gone down in part because of a proposed change in service delivery at the museum next year, where we're not going to be open 7 days a week, and as well the staffing associated with the camps and the like. We've made adjustments based upon the experience that we've had. You want to go to the next slide, please? So you can see how the compensation budget is going up almost just over 9%. And as I already mentioned, category 2, you've seen the adjustment. So in part, it going up is really a reallocation from category 2 to category 3 up to category 1. But it's also a reflection of the cost of living increases that you have approved on the wages, as well as that increase in the budget we use each year to move people through their wage bands. So the overall increase in compensation is just under 8%. You want to go to the next one? So just looking down, the next few slides will break it down by category. So again, there's really no surprises in how the numbers have moved. It's a function of the COLA, the change in the merit increases year over year, the reallocation of time based on actual timesheets. We have allowed for, and this was discussed a bit at the meeting, an increase in legal and other advisory services for amalgamation. We have made the determination that we are going to establish a cost center for all amalgamation costs so that we can start to track them and hopefully be provided the opportunity to bill somebody for those costs. We have seen an increase in issues of this building, and so we have allowed a bit more money to increase the maintenance and repair costs in this building. And floodplain mapping, should that bullet not be on that slide? Okay, so we should have removed that line. So our auditor is here today, and I've forgotten your name. I'm so sorry.
Donna.
I wanted to, but you was too afraid to. So, Donna, what's your last name?
Roger.
So, welcome to Donna. She's here to help explain a couple of things if you have questions. So, one of the conversations that she and Stacy had in recent weeks was where we are accounting for our floodplain map. And actually, I'm going to turn it over to Stacy to explain it because she will do a better job than that one.
So floodplain mapping or hazard mapping has historically been under the operating budget. We are working on a proposal to develop a strategy for how we get it done because we do need to do more of them and catch up, and it's an asset having that data. Just after I started here with MVCA, we moved the purchase of the LiDAR data is an asset. We use it, we utilize it in assessing plans, etc. So we are using it towards revenue, and it has useful life. The floodplain mapping is the same. It's a lot of work to develop it, and it's a data set that feeds the models. We use it as part of our FW system. We use it in terms of the reg limits that again we're discussing. Does it need more planning? So it does generate or is used to determine where revenue is. So part of the shift is moving that section, those hazard mapping, to being a capital. It's part of the capital. It's an asset. So that's the shift between when the school spread center with the F&A. It also allows it to be put into your 10-year capital planning. If you're planning that out, what's the strategy on the hazard mapping? So that's the shift. And Donna helped with, yes, they should be under the assets. So if we have specific questions there.
Sure.
Yeah, I do have a question on that. If it is an asset, is it a depreciating asset? Because of course, now that can be over time. So is it something that's depreciated over time?
Yes, that's the intention. We will depreciate it over the useful life. So instead of incurring all the cost in the year that asset is developed, will incur the cost over the life that has been used, and then as they're updated, that will continue.
Okay, thank you.
Katie?
So then how do you determine what the life,
Such a great question.
No.
It's such a good question. I will use the expertise of the staff here. I think the MOU talks with the city talks about 5 years. 10 years?
Yeah, I think it's 10.
10, sorry. Yeah, so it's an estimate. When we audit estimates, we rely on management and your knowledgeable staff in helping us ensure that estimate is reasonable. We'll look at the MOU, we'll look at those types of things to determine that period. Didn't get quite that detailed yet, because we're not doing the audit right now, but just wanting to make sure that it's reported in the correct place.
Euro can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think sort of the benchmark that we aim for is at minimum once every 10 years.
That's correct, and obviously depends where the market is, right? And some areas in Canada still so that subject to major development that may, require a more frequent update. Being whereas in other places, watershed, you might not choose to update the manuals for 20 years.
Okay, go to the next slide, please. So on the capital, is the next one the municipal levy or was it the capital? Okay, great. So in terms of capital, this is based upon actual projects being planned. So we have 2 dam safety reviews planned for next year, the Widow Lake and the Bennett Lake dams, as well as hopefully we will get to build our water and sewer connection next year. We also need to replace the holding tank that's at Morris Island Conservation Area and complete the accessible ramp at the middle of the tail to the Ed Center. So there are other, smaller sundry projects, but those are the main ones. So at the FNA meeting, the question was asked, are there other projects that we should be pushing forward given the potential of amalgamation and, do we want to make use of our reserves? So I did have the conversation with Euro about, there was a question about what are the next dam safety reviews on the list. So he and I discussed what the potentials are, and I'll give an initial answer and then Euro, you can add as you see fit. So we start working on dam safety reviews in the year prior to undertaking them. So we're not actually well positioned to undertake additional dam safety reviews next year because we haven't done the preparatory work that's needed to actually carry them out. There is the possibility that we could do a condition assessment. The next one on our list is Beagle. We think it would be our next candidate. It does take a different additional effort to do. And it's, dependent upon no more pat leaves or mat leaves and stuffing stabilization and that this amalgamation thing doesn't cause disruption next year. So while we feel we could potentially add it, we would do so with reservation just because what we have mapped out for next year uses all the staff resources we have with very little leeway for any sort of disruption in staffing or the organization itself associated with amalgamation. Euro, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Well, I think it was a summary. Probably I would just say that on the dam safety is a very data intensive projects, and I'm actually planning dam safety use several years before we got safety of that number. And the reason why is consultant fees. So just I would advise against spending $290,000 for a study that I'm able to deliver with proper planning well under $80,000. And the other thing is why these studies should be planned well ahead of time is obviously the data that comes into those studies, bathymetry surveys, engineering studies, frequencies, and of course, I will end up the 2 smaller house drivers for dam safety and But how I was calculating in the last 5 years, I was aligning on the capital infrastructure line with our asset market plan and our field book, so that at the time, the time is for the next things like all these other things really for the study, and that allows us to really reduce the cost.
So we can come back to this later when we have the discussion, but this what you see here does not allow for any additional capital projects. Actually. Next slide, please. So in terms of the levy, this is the amount that we're seeing in terms of the change, and it also shows the special levy that we pay every year to the city of Ottawa for the delivery of the baseline monitoring program for the city of Ottawa. You want to go to the next slide, please? So in summary, this is where the money is being spent. You can see amongst the different program areas. So the largest one, of course, is watershed management, and then followed by both flood forecasting and the flood and erosion control program and corporate services. The conservation services, which is, operation of the conservation areas, is actually quite small. And conceivably, with the signing of the KMP, we'll be able to potentially reallocate some funds next year once we sort out with the counties the phased implementation of these components of that. And then the last are the category 3 and 2 programs. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. So as I've always said, your municipal levies pay almost 70% of the operating budget. We are able to cost recover a significant amount from fees, but you can see that the combined amount from the provincial and federal government is under $200,000. It really is not significant. And that's a message we try to, make people aware of. Times like these when the province is coming down quite heavy-handed. And not a significant drawdown on the reserve fund. You can go to the next slide, please. And this is just the same, so you can see more clearly the change year over year between 25-26, and where the reduction in the use of the operating reserve is because we're transferring that amount onto the levy for that staffing in part. Okay, and also the reason why you're seeing the reduction in provincial and federal grants is because we're basing this upon actuals. We have not been successful in getting federal grants. And so this year we're proposing we're not going to assume that. Okay, next slide, please. So this is how the year-end reserve balances are going to change. So overall, we are going to be drawing down a bit from both. So the net reserve allocation, we take the money in, we do pay as you go on the capital side. So we are actually going to see a net reduction in both of those reserve funds. I think that's the last one, is it? Yes, it is. So happy to answer any questions you have.
Richard.
So the pie chart showing how we spend our money. When we have if we provide the round part.
Yep.
Are you saying that conservation authorities, that would be a small sliver compared to ours?
It's on the expenditure one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could call it the expenditure slide, please.
I'm just wondering how we compare to others.
The one prior?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. So watershed management.
We'll be all like that.
Everybody's gonna have that, but I suspect you're right. It should be less. Theirs would be less, but their category 3 would be more.
Yeah.
Yes. But I'm not familiar with her, so I'm agreeing with you in principle, not because I actually say that definitively. Okay. Any other questions?
Questions? Seeing none, I will read the motion. Resolved that the Board of Directors approve the draft budget as amended by the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee for strict relation to member municipalities for comment. I need someone to move that. Janet? Seconded by Bev. All in favor? Carried. Right. On to item 6, I'm hoping this one goes fairly quickly. We need a presentation.
Both if they've had a chance to read the report, I can give them a 2-minute summary.
Go.
Okay, so the 2-minute summary is that historically, this organization has largely fulfilled the duty officer responsibilities in that 24/7 oversight of the system on a seasonal basis, primarily during the flooding season in the spring. Recent provincial guidelines updated in 2023 say you really need to be planning this for 365, particularly in light of the impacts of climate change. The spring freshet is now a much longer period. It can start as early as February and it can go into, late May. And because we're having more convective, strange weather during the balance of the year, where you're having these storms come through, like the tornadoes and the like, and massive rainstorms that just dump a bunch of water on you. So they're saying you really need to be putting in place a system of duty officers that allows for 24/7, 365 monitoring of your system and the ability to notify the public of anything with risk that they may be incurring. So we have looked at the current responsibilities. We've made some adjustments. We now have 3 people trained up to do this role. We've looked across the other CAs to see how these positions are compensated and managed. And so the proposal in this document is based upon, I would say, what many of the other CAs are doing. Basically, if you're carrying a phone after hours during the weekday, you're getting paid an extra $50 a day to have that phone with you and available to answer it. And then if you're working on a weekend or a holiday, the assumption is you're going to get a 3-hour minimum pay to be monitoring the system and also monitoring that phone on those days. So, and the 3-hour minimum is in the same as what's required under the Employment Standards Act. So this is the proposal up there. And that's what we're looking for sign off. What you see in the actual amended text to the employee manual, everything in red is what we brought to the finance admin. At the finance admin, they requested clarification on a couple of matters. And so the text in the body of the report in blue are those additional clarifications. The 2 issues raised were that they wanted it to be clear that if you are carrying the phone for $50 a day, but then you actually have to take a call and do work outside of normal hours, the 3-hour ESA kicks in, but it's not that 3-hour plus 50. The 50 is embedded in the 3 hours. I wanted that clarification. The second clarification is that they're not stackable. So if you take a call at 11 and you take another one at 1, it's not 3 hours plus 3 hours. It's 3 hours total. So those were the 2 clarifications that were requested and are in the proposed amendment.
Any questions for Sally? None. Read the motion. Resolved, the Board of Directors approve the update of the MVCA employee manual to include the duty officer compensation table and related amendments recommended in report 3528/25 as amended per direction of the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee. I need someone to move that. Amy? And someone to second it. Wayne? All in favor? Carried. Moving on to item 7, Stacy for information. Update.
We'll keep it quick, because I know there's other stuff to get to. The year is on track. Direct expenses are down about 83,000. There's some reallocation between category 1, 2, 3 as compensation, based similar to what Sally was saying about timesheets. There were some cancellation postponements of projects due to time constraints. That's having a minor impact. The big impact on the capital is we're not doing water and sewer this year, unfortunately, because that also means we're projecting it's going to cost more next year than what we would have seen this year. Just as a note, the 10-year capital plan will be coming later in the winter or the spring. So one, that's still coming, but it also does open if we want to have more info and we want to try and spend some more in the capital, that's still potential. That's coming March or April likely. I did not include the investment statement initially. I've added it into the report, not using this as being a thing, but the quarterly report. The September 30th balance was just over 3.1 million, which was up about 53K in approximately 4 months. And the November 30th balance was 3,126,000. So it's doing reasonably well, better than the GICs. And we'll see how that goes longer term. We'll be when we bring the capital plan back, we'll bring back looking at to be reallocated. I'm not sure if people have any specific questions.
Any questions for Stacy? Comments? None, thank you, Stacy. Moving to item 8, where we'll be going into camera for 2 items. Resolved that the board of directors move to camera discussions regarding labor relations or employee negotiations. And further resolved that Sally McIntyre remain in the room and MVCA staff leave the room for initial discussion. And further resolved that Sally McIntyre leave the room upon request for further discussion. And then B, resolved that the board of directors move into camera discussions regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including employees of the authority. And further resolved that Sally McIntyre and MVCA staff leave the room. Does someone to move that? Dana? Or do you have a question? No. And seconded? Cindy? You?